Good afternoon. You guys made it through the lunch line, huh? Yeah, I didn't. I had to get a takeout salad, but anyway, I'm so happy to be here and really thrilled to have Charles joining us this afternoon. Has anybody ever gone through one of Charles' trainings? He's amazing. And for those of you who haven't, I'll let Charles share much more of his history and his knowledge, but his journey started in 2009, right? With cone beam, CB, CT scanning, and anatomage and guided surgery into the implant world and into owning a lab and now doing full arch restorative complex restorative planning. So I'll turn it over. Thank you, Charles. And yeah, we appreciate you sharing your knowledge.
Hey, can we hear you okay? Yeah, awesome. So I show this because I often struggle balancing craftsmanship with running a business because um, I want to be the best technician, but at the same time, I'm also like really fascinated with like branding and pricing and numbers, and so like there's a constant kind of struggle between the two. And I think today I'm going to show some things where I try to reconcile those two things. So yeah, I started with Anatomage 2009. I was with Biomet 3i for a while, and then also when Biomet turned into Zimmer, I met Len briefly through that at that time, and then my wife and I met. We dated long distance. I moved to Oregon, and then we took over this lab. So her parents started this lab called Ceramics West Dental Lab like 30 years ago. And it was just like a mom and pop crown and bridge lab. And so we took it over and we made it digital. And about 5 years ago, we decided that we wanted to really focus on cosmetics and do like the hardest things possible. And for us, that was full arch. And so 5 years ago, we stopped doing crown and bridge. We stopped single unit implants. We do full arch, and then we do guided surgery full arch, and that's pretty much it. And I also have this company called Alliance Training. And what I realized was that we have all of these modalities. We have grammetry, we have photogrammetry, we have all this stuff, but we don't really have resources for technicians to call other technicians and be like, hey, like, does this really work? Like, what are the tricks and tips? What are the pitfalls? And so we created this platform which has recorded content. We also do live training. And a lot of the stuff is, hey, I just bought an iCam. How do I do a surgical conversion? Like, what are the records? What are the processes? And so we do one-on-one training, we record it all, and then we help you build training material for your own lab so that if you add more people, if you have turnover, you can go in and have like a scalable way to train your people. We have a course coming up in April. It's a Friday, Saturday course, and it's a live surgery course. So on Friday, we're going to do an upper arch. We're going to place Straumann implants. We're going to scan it with the iCam. And then after the scan, I'll show all the records. I'll do a live design, and then we'll mill it overnight. And the next day, the patient will come back, and then we'll deliver the case. And so if you are a lab that's interested in photogrammetry, maybe you have photogrammetry, we have very unique ways that we take records and process the data to give you a really, hopefully, ideal result. And what I realized is that none of us, well, how many people are lab technicians in this room? Yeah, like none of us get here on our own, right? We learn from someone else, we learn from forums, and then those people learn from other people. And so, same with me, like I'm probably not going to show anything original because none of us come up with anything original. We learn from other people. And I read this book last year. It's called The Book of Awakening. It's by this guy, his name is Mark Nepo. And it's a New York Times bestseller, and it's a daily meditation book. And so every day, starting from January 1 to December 31st, there's a little segment about how to connect and your history. And on the very last day, which is December 31st, I just want to read this segment because I feel like this epitomizes our trade, which is apprenticeship and learning and sharing. And so December 31st, it's called I See You. For centuries, African bushmen have greeted each other in this way. When the one becomes aware of his brother or sister coming out of the brush, he exclaims, I see you. And the one approaching rejoices, I am here. Those people in our lives who have validated our personhood by seeing us and exclaiming, so are the foundations of our self-worth. Think of who they are. So for us, it's like all the people before us, all of the CDTs and MDTs with all that knowledge who passed that to us. It is important to note that being seen enables us to claim our lives, and then it becomes possible to pass the gift on to others. It is the joy of first seeing and then first knowing. This is the gift of love. And so that's my way of saying to all the people, that indirectly or directly have helped me. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. And that's why I try to do this, because this is all about love and sharing. And I have really no censorship for my business or what we do. So feel free to ask candid questions. And I forget the name of what this is labeled, but really it's actually, I should just call it this, which is real talk, because there's a lot of stuff that we do that works and that doesn't work, and that some of it's commercialized, and the truth gets sort of mixed in there. So we don't really know like what is going to be applicable to our business and what isn't. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to waste your time. And so we're going to do a quick exercise, and it's not going to involve talking to anyone. Okay, all you need is your phone. So pull out your phone. Everyone's got a phone. And go ahead and scan this QR code. And then it should pull up a poll. Everyone got that QR code? Yep. Okay, so we'll start super easy. Does everyone see this? Yeah? Did you do the QR code again? Yeah, okay, well, here we go. I got you. Got it? Okay, cool. All right. So let me pull this up again. The point of this is that, okay, we got 5 people answered already. And I feel like this question can really ruin friendships, right? I mean, this is, it's interesting, and it's a very individual question, but we're gonna start easy, and then we'll get to more difficult questions. And the goal is that I wanna figure out who are you in this audience to help tailor what happens in the next hour or so to fit you and your business. Okay, lots of Costco people. I'm a Costco person as well. Next one. This is gonna really wreck some of you. How many spaces come after a period? So if you're writing an email or a document, how many spaces come after a period? Okay, we've got 9, 10, 12, 14. Okay, it's 17 people, 18. It's almost 50-50. And the people that voted 2 spaces, if you voted 2 spaces like me, that means you're old. Because about 3 years ago, they switched from 2 spaces to 1, which is nuts, right? I mean, how fast things change. Doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it's like, why did we need that extra space? It doesn't, we don't, 2 spaces were fine. I'm like, why do we need an extra space? But anyway, okay. Next one. When is the worst time to come to Chicago? Now or not? I mean, every freaking year. 2 years ago, I was in Portland, and we had this huge ice storm. So I board the plane, I fall asleep, because all of us, we work like crazy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, so like we can come here, right? So I'm dead tired. I fall asleep, I wake up 3 hours later, I look outside, it's all white, thinking we're in the air. Turned out we were still on the ground, it was just snowing. And so we deplaned, and it took me 10 hours to take the train home, and I totally missed lab day. But yeah, now is the worst time to come to Chicago, right? Okay, how is this pronounced? Okay, Stephanie? So 18% of the people, you can probably just head out. Unless you're from Canada, then you get a free pass, okay? All right, let's get more serious. What technique is used most often in your lab or office? Chairside denture conversion, that could be like a denture conversion, it could be smart denture conversion, photogrammetry, or grammetry. This is interesting. I did the same thing at my strawman talk yesterday, and it was primarily chairside denture conversions. But that's lots of photogrammetry in this room. Not a lot of grammetry, okay? That is interesting. And that's good to know. Would you be interested in an Argen hands-on course covering photogrammetry, zirconia, green state finishing, and Mio application? Does that seem interesting? Does that seem like something that you would be interested in hearing from? Heck yeah, okay. Nah, I'm good. Okay, that's probably Connor. Okay, lots of interest in something like that. How many arches does it take to master full arch? Master can be whatever your definition is of mastery, but it could be something like, well, how many arches does it take for you to have seen all the things that could go wrong, potentially? Okay, 250. Okay, so between 250 to 500 arches. Cool. Okay. Agree or disagree? In a double arch case, a denture conversion will provide a more predictable bite versus photogrammetry. Okay, about 2/3 disagree, a third of you agree. In photogrammetry, grammetry workflows, what is the most predictable way to register surgical scans to pre-op scans? So most of you who are doing photogrammetry will understand this. Traditional markers, okay, bone screws, teeth. And I would expect almost no one to vote for CT segmentation. And that is proven to be accurate. Okay, that's exactly what I needed to know. Cool, so let's go back. Okay, I'm gonna show this chart a lot today. And this is the emotional cycle of change. And you can apply this to pretty much anything. So I call it the emotional cycle of change of anything. So for instance, this is really common. You know, I speak a lot about photogrammetry and grammetry like OptiSplint. And oftentimes, to people that are doing denture conversions, I kind of describe it in this way, is that you might be a lab that, let's say you do removable, and all of a sudden you decide, hey, like we're gonna do conversions and do more fixed full arch, right? So what happens is that you start here, which is stage 1, uninformed optimism, which is, I don't know a lot about this, but I have a lot of positive feelings. I think it's gonna be really successful. Uninformed optimism. And then what happens is that you start to do cases, and then you do conversions, maybe you do 1 or 2 a week. And then what happens is that all of a sudden you're doing 4 or 5. And so every day you're doing a conversion all day, and you come back to the lab, and then you're at the lab all day. And so this slope, at some point you pass this line, which is the phase of optimism to pessimism. And you go to stage 2, which is informed pessimism. So that could be like, hey, you know what? I'm doing a lot of denture conversions, and it takes a lot of time, and I'm not in the lab enough to do what I need to do to make finals or run my business. And then you keep going because you don't know how to change, and you end up in here, which is the valley of despair, okay? So this is this valley here, and you have 2 options when you get to here. You can quit and then find something else and start all over again, or you push through. You might say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna hire someone else. I'm gonna find other people who can do my conversions with me. I'm gonna build a team. You push through and you get to stage 4, which is informed optimism, which is, hey, I know this is hard. I know that these are the bottlenecks, but now I feel like I have a good feeling I'm gonna get through this and be profitable. And then you get to success and fulfillment, okay? That's kind of the cycle of that, the way these things go. And what I find is that people go through this and they do denture conversions, and then all of a sudden they get photogrammetry and they think that this cycle is going to be different, but it's not, right? Because what happens is that you don't know a lot about it, but it's a scanner, it's cool, it's sexy, so you're in uninformed optimism, and you start doing scans, and at some point you realize, oh shoot, I'm still going to offices, my team is struggling getting the data we need, potentially we're not able to meet timelines in a predictable way, and so you end up again in the valley of despair. And then you have to figure out, okay, do I go to something else, or do I push through and go to success and fulfillment? And so this is I'm going to apply this to a couple of different things, but in every stage of our lab, even when we were full service, when we went to full arch, same thing happened. When we're doing conversions, same thing happened. When we switched from conversions to grammetry OptiSplint, same thing happened. When we went from grammetry to photogrammetry, same thing happened. Like this is a very common emotional cycle that we experience in business. And I have ICAM. And the reason why I brought this is because, number one, if you look at the literature, it is the most researched scanner. It's got 4 cameras, which is the definition of dynamic photogrammetry. All the other scanners that have 2 scanners are stereo photogrammetry. So when you use the iCam and you go side to side, when you capture 50 views, it's actually 50 times 4, 200 views. And so you triangulate in 50 different positions. Anyway, I did the worst thing you could do possible yesterday, which was I was going to speak about a Strawman grammetry system at 1 o'clock, and the CEO of ICAM was there. So I talked to him for 20 minutes, and all he did was basically shit on grammetry that I was going to speak on in literally 20 minutes. And I had like all these questions about, like these burning questions about like, what's the accuracy? What's the issues with grammetry? And he crushed all these questions because photogrammetry is what he studied his whole life. And I asked him, why don't people teach CT segmentation for photogrammetry? And he said that they developed this 5 years ago. And he said the reason why is because labs that know how to do it, it's such a secret to them, they don't want other people to know. That's what he said. And I remember 10 years ago, a speaker came to Portland, and I won't mention who it was, but he was showing some stuff that was pretty amazing. And during the lunch lecture, I was like, hey, how'd you do this? And he's like, well, I really can't tell you. And I was like, dude, you're here to teach people. Like, why would you share the things that help other people be successful? So I decided if I ever did any type of speaking, like, I would share anything, whatever. And when I come to lab day, and you're probably the same, I just want to find one golden nugget, right? Like nothing's going to blow us away at this point, but if I find one little thing one tweak or one different way of doing things, like that's worth the whole trip. And so I'm going to front load this with a golden nugget that totally changed our practice in terms of photogrammetry. And the stuff that the CEO is talking about, I'm going to show you now. And if you watch it and you leave, fine. Like this is for you. And so this is section 1, which is CT segmentation. And so if you do photogrammetry, you have 2 options. You do fiducial markers or you do CT segmentation. And no one mentioned that they do it, so I got to explain it to you. And so there's 2 reasons why using the CT is better than using a fiducial marker, okay? And the reason why is fiducial marker selection. And so the whole point of photogrammetry is that you've got a case with like some terminal dentition, and then you wax up the case, right? And you have some like fiducial markers, in this case the palate, and you take a pre-op scan, and then you do your surgery, you extract the teeth, you do a bone reduction, and then you do a second scan, okay? And the whole point is that you have a way of taking this and then merging it to your wax up. Like that's the whole point, is that 80% of the work is done ahead of time. These are not great. I like these from Digital Arches. These are like this is a nice geometry that when you put in the palette, it's got nice edges and grooves, and this works out well. And I don't do any crown and bridge, but people also use this. Like let's say you put in the palette, you take a pre-op scan, you prep all the teeth, and then you've got a way to like merge your scans together. So this is really nice. And then in this case, I did grammetry, and then I merged it to my wax up, and then that's kind of how we did the case. So that's the standard fiducial marker workflow. The problem is when you do challenging cases with different types of bone reduction, different surgeons, different mouth openings, things change. And so I'm going to show you a case that went backwards pretty quick. So I did this case with Kim Schlom. She's a prosthodontist, and her husband's named Mark, and he's an oral surgeon. So they're married pros, oral surgeon. They're in Bend, Oregon. And then Tano is a super nice guy. He's a dental technician in Bend. And so Strawman, they were looking to do some marketing material on their new implant. And so Kim had come across this patient, Nicole, And Nicole she was not a drug user, no history of drug abuse, but she had dry mouth, xerostomia, and so that leads to right, decay and basically, in this case, tooth loss. Plus, she's got excess gingival display on top of that. So a very challenging case. So Nicole presents to Kim's office, and she had basically needs upper and lower hybrids. Okay, and so Kim kind of pre-implanted her for an upper and lower FP3, and she didn't have the money for it. But her then boyfriend and her dad were both veterans, and so Kim decided to do this case pro bono. And so I was going to come and do guided surgery, and then Tano and I were going to do an overnight conversion. This was last April, and then ICAM was going to come because they're launching their distribution with ICAM. And so we worked up this case in SmileCloud, and so you can see we got to do a big bone reduction here because she's got excess gingival display, and this could really be an orthognathic case. Like that's a lot of reduction. It ended up being about 11 or 12 millimeter bone reduction. And Kim's office is in Bend. I'm in Portland. It's about 2.5 hours apart. And the surgery was on a Monday, and it's Wednesday, the previous Wednesday, and my youngest son, Dean, is sick. And what happens is that he was 2 at the time. I would like feed him his bottle, and he would cough, 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 and then he would throw up. Okay, so this is Wednesday before we leave. And then Thursday, same thing, puking at night. Friday, puking. Saturday night, right, the kid just pukes. And I know the way my house works is that the kids get sick, and then my wife gets sick, and then I get sick last. And usually what happens is like the sickness merges, and then I get like a more powerful version of that at the very end. And so I know that like come Monday, like I'm gonna be dead, right? So we all go to Bend because we had planned it to be like a family trip. So we go to Bend, and the weeks leading up to Bend, I was struggling with my double arch photogrammetry cases because I was having a posterior premature contact and anterior open bite. That was happening pretty consistently. And I'm a denturist in Oregon. I do a lot of removable. And in removable, we have this thing that's called the Gothic arch tracing. Has everyone heard of? Yeah, right? So it's like a very predictable way of finding centric relation. And the way it works is if you haven't done it, is you have usually wax rims or something, and on the top you have a strike plate that's got some sort of indelible ink or Sharpie or paint, and the bottom has got a pin, and you take these patients through the movements, and every single time, it's like magic, it creates an arrow. And the point of this arrow is basically centric relation. And it's in the literature, it's a 95%. It's a very, very predictable process. And then you basically adjust the pin, you take a by registration, and then you mount the case. And so having done a lot of removable cases, like my background is a removable, I was like, how can I take this and digitize it? And along this time, I ran into this company called Segmark. Has anyone heard of Segmark before? Yeah. So the idea is that instead of using fiducial markers, you use radiopaque healing caps, and you utilize the patient's full head CT. Because in the CT scan, right, I can see the condyle, and I can verify that the condyle is seated in the fossa, and that they're actually in centric relation. And so what I did was, I was using a lot of OptiSplint. So what I did was, we created our own radiopaque markers, and this is printed out of like an X-ray resin, and this was milled out of zirconia. And so I take these to surgery. So surgery's Monday. The film crew is here from Straumann. We're placing their brand new BLC implant. And then while they're doing this, I'm starting to feel feverish. Okay, it's happening. And so I wanted to test these markers. And so I put the markers into my vestibule. I go in the back and I CT scan myself. And this one is zirconia, and this one's printed resin. So that one has a lot better fidelity, much higher resolution. And so what happened was, we did the case, and with the film crew there, the surgery started at 9 a.m., and then at about 8 p.m., we started taking the scans. So she was intubated. She was basically under for 10 to 12 hours. And this was our upper pre-op scan. So this is her existing teeth. These are the 2 arch tracers in the palate. And then on the bottom, in the mandible, we have one here and one here. She had a very shallow vestibule. And so when you put a marker here, you have to go below the bone reduction line. We couldn't do it, so we only got these 2 scan markers. So already I'm kind of feeling like not great. And then what happened was iCam comes, and they're trying to scan the case with the iCam, and it's not working. They tried scanning for an hour. None of the scans are working. And we found out later it was because the laptop they were using was their Dropbox was syncing to the entire database from their headquarters. So there was just like gigs and gigs of data being transferred through Dropbox, and there was no memory left on the computer. And so the iCam failed. And so what we ended up doing was we used a backup OptiSplint, and we actually scanned her with these radiopaque healing caps. I didn't think we were going to need to use these, but what happened was Gaetano or Tano was lining up the scans, and this is now it says about 9:30 at night. We're in Kim's office in the lab, and he's like, "Hey, we got a problem. These scan buys or these fiducial markers aren't lining up." So at some point, he must have like had the flap, sutured the flap closed in the palate, and he must have dislodged that one. So now we only have one in the palate. And then we look at our surgical scan on the bottom, and then we basically hardly have any geometry here and very little here. So what happened was Tano was trying to line up the scans, and they're wildly off, like rotated 30 to 40 degrees. So he spends 3 hours. So now it's midnight. We can't get the scans to line up. And so luckily we had taken the CT scan with her, and her pre-op CT, and we had never checked it, but she actually was in a closed MIP bite, and her condyle was actually seated. So what we did was we took our maxillary scan, we merged it to her pre-op, and we take our mandibular, we merged it to the pre-op, and that's how we were able to maintain the bite. And so by doing this, I'm maintaining her current VDO, and I'm basically creating and maintaining like the condyle position, so I'm maintaining the centric relation. And so what happened was it lined up well, and then we had waxed up the case ahead of time, and the wax up lined up well. And then the next morning at 4 a.m., we finished these temporaries. I had 140-degree fever. I went back to our condo, and then the next morning I missed it. So the film crew came back, they delivered it. Gaetano got all the high fives and all the hugs. I got 0 credit, and this is Nicole later that week. So not bad. I mean, I would say that the bar for making this case look good was pretty low, considering what she had going on. But the idea is that, we basically call our shot. We do a small design and be like, hey, this is what we're gonna get. This is our result, and we got pretty close to it. And so here is a kind of a breakdown of fiducial markers versus CT segmentation. So if you do a single arch maxilla, it doesn't really matter what you use because the maxilla is staying in place, right? If they have 12 teeth, when you line up, you get pretty close, you're not going to have issues. The challenge is that if you have a dentures patient with mobile tissue, so if they have a denture or maybe they don't wear their denture and you're trying to figure out centric relation, like that can be very challenging. If the tissue is mobile, that can be very challenging for your fiducial markers. CT segmentation, these two are preferred. If you do a big bone reduction, you can risk losing markers like we did for her case, right? We did big bone reduction in the anterior. We could not get that bone screw above the symphysis. In those situations, the CT segmentation is more reliable. This is the challenge, is that labs with advanced digital capacity are familiar with this, but if you can do this, and you can do it accurately, consistently and scalable, then that future-proofs your lab. Because what happens is if you're in an environment and you have all the labs with the same technology, with similar pricing, like why would a clinician use you versus someone else? And it's this, at least for me, like this totally changed. All the cases where we had those posterior premature contacts went away. We got very, very consistent bites on our double arch cases. And for me, this is the big thing, is maintaining centric relation. It's nice that when you use these scan markers, there's no pins. Like surgeons hate placing pins. They don't like doing pre-op scans. And that was a big thing for them. But for me, like I want to maintain centric relation. And so going into it, I'm like, okay, like how do I do Gothic arch tracing for these fixed hybrid cases? And so I would basically make a jig, right? We do a printed prototype. I would do the exact same thing. Make a strike plate. This is the Joe Masad Gothic arch tracing kit, which you can get. It's pretty nice. And you just basically, glue this strike plate on top, use indelible ink. You take the patient through these movements, and like magic, you get that arrow, and that point of that arrow is centric relation. It is incredibly, incredibly predictable and reliable. and then you put basically a washer over that, and then you put that back into the mouth, and you make sure they can go back, and they're going back into the same position. You capture with byte registration, and then you remount the case, and that's your case mounted in central relations. But that's an analog way, right? I want a way to do this digitally, right? This is the analog version of it. So putting it all together, this is Michael, and obviously Michael's got some issues of failing dentition, some perio going on, and so the plan for Michael was to do upper and lower FP3 hybrids. So extraction, bone reduction, and implant placement, scan, photogrammetry or grammetry, and deliver these temporaries the next day. And so our records are thus, is a pre-op CT scan with condyles seated, and I want to get as big of a field of view as possible, because the more bony anatomy we have, the better our registration is going to be. And so if you look here, I can see there's a condyle. I can see here in the 3 that's seated. I can look in the cross sections to make sure it's seated. And then I've got my upper and lower trio scan. So in this case, MIP was consistent with centric relation. And this is the secret sauce to these cases, is that number one, there's no fiducial markers. Number two, you have a way of digitizing a Gothic arch tracing. And so I do the wax up, and this is basically what we call the takeoff position, where we've got our pre-op CT scan, I've got my wax up done, and so we go to surgery, and we do the reduction, we place the implants, we put in our radiopaque healing caps. So this can be done with grammetry or photogrammetry. And you can see these radiopaque healing caps show up very clear on the CT scan. And then we have a trio scan, so we put the caps on the multi-units, we take a soft tissue scan. For the bottom, I mean, this is not super necessary because we can always have a high water prosthesis on the lower, but on the top, it's nice. So this is our trio scan of the top with the same radiopaque healing caps on the multi-units. Okay, so this is our pre-op position, and then this is our day of surgery post-op scan. So the idea is you take this, you use the bony anatomy, and you merge it to the maxilla of the pre-op. And so if you have a fiducial marker, right, you have only 2 points, maybe 3 points in the palate. Why I do it this way, I can have 50 points of anatomy completely around this entire thing, and when you merge it, it's right on. There's no question that your merging is very accurate and precise, and especially on the same thing on the mandible. We have all of this bony data, so literally you can choose 100 points of consistent anatomy and merge these two things together, and that's how we get this. So this is our post-op CT scan that's in the pre-op CT scan position. So the condyle is seated, we've maintained the vertical dimension of occlusion, and we're maintaining centric relation. And then we take our soft tissue scan with these healing caps, we merge them to this, because this healing cap is the same as that one. So we merge these soft tissue scans to this, and so this is the next level of our stack. And then the last level is whatever you want it to be. So if you use ICAM, these can be the ICAM ref bodies, so you merge your ICAM data to that. In this case, we used grammetry, we used OptiSplint, and so these have the same exact geometry as the healing caps. So then we merge our OptiSplint to those healing caps, and then we've got our stack. So this is soft tissue scan, so we've got soft tissue information, we have implant information, and it's lined up exactly in the same previous centric relation and vertical as the previous workup, and then this is my wax up. So the idea is that this whole process should not take very long, because all of this is done ahead of time. 80% of the work is done before surgery. All we're doing is simply adding the implant positions and then adjusting the intaglio to match the new tissue position. And so what we do is we always deliver next day. And I definitely went through a period of about a year where we did a lot of printed surgical provisionals, and we use them all. We use Flexera Ultra, we use Archex or Crown X from Straumann. We used Onyx 2 Tough, tried them all. And even if we follow all the parameters to the T, I was still having some breakage issues. And so we went back and now we mill all of our provisionals. So we always deliver next day. And in Portland, the most of the prosthodontists were doing conversions, and so it was a challenge to convince them to go from a same-day conversion to a next-day delivery. But my verbiage is this, is that number one, it's a much shorter day for the patient. So anyone who's done a double arch hybrid knows that if surgery goes 4 hours, like you could be there for another 2, 3, 4 hours. You don't know. It could be an 8-hour day. The patient doesn't want that. Number one. Number two, because I have a digital footprint of this, going from this to a final prosthesis, it's much shorter. I would say 90% of the time, the dentist does not have to anesthetize the patient the next day. And so our protocol is that we mill, and then we have the patient come back the next day after lunchtime, and then we have them book either a 30-minute or 1-hour appointment. And from a design perspective, my priority is not shaping the tissue for the final prosthesis. I definitely want to have like a hygienic, convex, intaglio surface, but my priority is reducing or making it as seat as passive as possible. I don't want a lot of tissue impingement, especially if it's a dentist that is not used to working in the surgical field, even if it's not a surgical field, but it's like the tissue is still fairly open, it's still kind of bloody. And so the priority is number one, under contouring the implant area so that things seat easily. Because if you're convincing people, if you're in an environment where everyone's doing conversions and you're trying to convince them to do a next day delivery, you got to make that thing easy as possible. And so my priority is that I don't do a lot of tissue pressure here on the top or bottom. I definitely under contour the areas around the multi-units because I want that thing to seat. The tissue we can deal with later. So this is Michael next day, and no adjustments on this provisional. And again, like previously, all of my cases had posterior premature contact, anterior open bite, because what happened is if a patient has 22 through 27 and they're used to like posturing forward, those teeth come back, they settle back into CR, and they hit posteriorly. And so the key here is that your records must be in centric relation. And so that's where the CT comes into place. It's definitely a paradigm shift for surgeons because most of them use that bite stick, right? They have the patients scan an open bite. So you have to go back, and the protocol is that closed bite, large field of view to visualize the condyle. And the key here is knowledge, because there's that saying, you know, if you say something ahead of time, it's an explanation. If it happens after the fact, it's a excuse, right? And so if I see a CT scan, if the condyle is not seated, I'll tell them, hey, here are your options. You can deprogram and do a leaf gauge bite and take a CT scan in CR. Option number one, that's the preferred option. Number two, I can try to digitally move the mandible forward or seat the condyle into the fossa, but the chances are you'll have to do some occlusal adjustments. And then you put the ball in their court, so that if you end up with like an anterior open bite, at least they know, hey, you know what? This is what happened, and this is how we fix it going forward. So this is all day of surgery stuff. We also I use this a lot in what I call a reset. And so this patient, Paul, had surgery during the pandemic, and both of his temporaries fractured, and he didn't come back for 2 years. So obviously vertical lost, right? And so what we tried to do was we tried to scan him with OptiSplint, and we tried to kind of guess where he was at. And he ended up like this. Right, this is a clone scan from that clone app. And this is what I'm talking about, is that when you try to guess, you try to figure out centric relation, if you don't nail it, you get this, right? Posterior premature contact, this big anterior open bite. And so what we did is I started doing what I call a CT segmentation reset. Because for Paul, I had his pre-op CT from 2 years ago, right, when he initially had his surgery. So what we did was we gave the prosthodontist or the surgeon radiopaque healing caps, and then we had them take a new CT scan with the same healing caps. And then we just repeat what we do on the day of surgery. I segment out the maxilla, I segment the mandible, and then we merge all of this into the preoperative position, because I know that his MIP position matches his centric relation position of the condyle. And so we designed new temporaries off of that, and he came back, and it's not perfect, but you can see at least, hey, we're much closer in terms of VDO, right? I mean, there's obviously a midline issue here, and there's still kind of a premature contact, but this is something where you can adjust it, take a bite, and do a really easy remount for this case. And so we do a lot of these cases where if we didn't load it, right, if we didn't load the case, maybe they were in the denture, maybe we didn't have good primary stability of the implants, we do a lot of these CT segmentation resets. So that is my liquid gold for you. So if you want to leave, leave. Because after this, it's just jokes. Okay. Any questions on? Yeah. So you're saying when you take a CT scan in MIP, how do you segment? How do you merge your like your trio scan to? Yeah. So the question is that, yeah, if you do, let's say you have a bunch of like PFMs or whatever, a bunch of scattered, you can't really see the size of edges, the occlusal. That's challenging, and there isn't a good workaround for that. I will say that I use co-diagnostics, and the AI was like started last year, where the AI will merge the STL to the CT scan, and I have found that it's actually pretty darn good, even in cases where it's completely blown out, right? Like maybe they got scanned with a partial in, and they got like PFMs or like gold crowns. Like it's there is guesswork for sure involved, but I find is that the deviation in the guesswork is still better than the way I was doing it before. It's not perfect, but it's still for me um, was still better than the previous. Yeah. There was another question. Yeah.
So you design those scan markers to match your whatever you're scanning your like abutments or implants with.
Yes.
But for people who are using the ICAM,
Yeah.
design it to match whatever library you're using, correct?
Yeah. So in ICAM, the healing caps that come with the ICAM ref bodies, they're radio opaque.
Oh,
Yeah. So that's what that's what the CEO was telling me. He was like, dude, we've been doing this for years. So they made it that way to do it. The problem is no one does it that way. Yeah, it's crazy. But what I did was I took the straw. We do a lot of Strawman. We took the Strawman 8mm healing cap, and we just designed our own because I found that sometimes the ref scan bodies are too short. So if you do a big bone reduction, the surgeons like never reduce tissue, right? And so like you only get like barely some of it poking up. And I can send you the files. I can give it to Stephanie or Ross. And but yeah, we've got a duplicate of the Strawman 8mm healing cap, which is in the ICAM library, and that always sticks up like 2 or 3 millimeters above the tissue, and that works out pretty well. Any other questions before we? Yeah. What screw am I using? Okay. Can I say whatever I want with screws? I can say whatever I want, right? Okay, cool. Strawman's like, no, don't say that. Okay, so and you guys, I don't think you sell these screws yet. We talked about this. You are now. You will be. Okay, so for Strawman, previously I used the DES 19.018, and I would mill directly to the multi-unit for my surgical temps. That kind of sucked because I would have to send the driver, and like the dentist, I would say, hey, make sure you have an Astra 050, or I have to send a driver, which is kind of a pain. And then once they came out with the 19.069, which is the new one with ASC, that one actually fits the Strawman SCS driver perfectly. And so now I switched to the 19.069, and it's awesome because I do 90% Strawman. They can use their normal Strawman driver, and then also if I need ASC, I can send the DES ASC driver with it. And so yeah, once you guys sell it, I just buy it from you. It would be great. That answer your question? Yeah. So then also for finals, you also referred to finals as well, or just final? Yeah. So my problem with third-party screws is that I don't know how long they're going to be around. And I probably said, you probably heard me talk, I probably said it before, right? Strauman's going to come out with their screw this year. Neodent already did. Just figure everyone else will have their own direct multi-unit screw. So in 5 or 10 years, is there going to be a Vortex screw and driver available? Like, I don't know. Right? Like that's not it's a lab that makes a screw. Like it's not, there's no incentive for them to make a screw if there's no demand for that screw. And so I plan to do this for another 15, 20 years. In 10 years, I don't want to have all these cases that have Vortex screws, Powerball screws, whatever screws, that all of a sudden they don't make anymore and that I can't get drivers anymore for. Because at that point, who's liable for it? And we don't know. It's no right or wrong. It's a gray area. So for photogrammetry, I say, hey, you know what? If I do photogrammetry, I'm gonna make you a bar. That's a given. I normally charge $7,500 for a zirconia sleeve and a tie bar, but because I'm forcing you into the bar, I will give it to you for I give it basically $1,000 discount. So I charge $5,700 for mono zirconia, $7,500 for a bar, and then if I force them into a bar because of photogrammetry, I basically meet them in the middle. And then I use OEM screws. So for a Strawman case, I mill my own bar, I use the OEM Strawman screw. That way, it's just easy and clean, right? But for a temp, I don't care. I really don't care what screw it is. The cool thing is that when we switched from tie bases to the desk screw, all of a sudden I made $700 more per case because I wasn't spending money on tie bases. Yeah. Any other questions before we? Yes, I use Blender for the bars. I split the bar, and I'll show some of that actually as well. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. All the alignments in ExoCAD. You could do them. You could do them in ExoCAD. I have found, for whatever reason, is that even in ExoCAD, when you mark the regions of interest, right, you pick points. I find that in co-diagnostics, for whatever reason, it's like the algorithms of matching work better, which is strange. I can't explain why. And so I take all of my STLs, I merge them in co-diagnostics, and I export them out in the same coordinate system. So I don't know why that is, but in my hands, co-diagnostics does a better job of merging the scans together. Yes.
The reset case.
Yeah.
The photo of the finish is still off. So.
Oh, this is a printed prototype. So it's still off for sure. But the point is that like I went from this to much closer by just doing that reset.
So what would you have done differently to get better? I mean, you only reset it.
Yeah. Yeah. So from here, what I would do is this is a process. Say, hey, adjust the bite, mark the midline. We have a lot of Kois people in our Pacific Northwest. So I say, take a Kois bite rim, mark the midline, and then I will take this and then either digitally or physically remount the case, and then my next prototype is going to be spot on.
So my question is, what would have been done differently to get it better?
Oh, I don't think I could have done anything differently. I think the problem is that he has gone 2 years with a collapsed VDO, and I think this is more of like he doesn't know where he's supposed to be. He went 2 years with 0 teeth, upper or lower, nothing. And so we went straight from that to this. So I think that could be, I don't have an answer for you on that. I don't know why, like it should have just dropped in perfectly. I agree. So part of that could be, it could be alignment error in here. It could be like maybe potentially he was actually not in CR, maybe he's posturing in a different position. So maybe a combination between those things led to this not being perfect. I went off the original pre-op, exactly. Yeah, and so I was just trying to get just incrementally better. Ideally, this would have been perfect for sure, and I can't tell you why, but I think it's a mixture between those two variables. Pretty darn close. Much better than what I was doing previously. And that for me, that was a total game changer because more and more labs were getting photogrammetry and people were doing it. Everyone had the same issues. Like, dude, double arch cases, I'm always grinding on the molars. I'm like, dude, this is the workflow. And then that was in my market, that was a game changer because this process is not easy to do, right? So that means it's not hard to learn, but if you don't know how to do it, I mean, it can be challenging to learn. And so there you go. Yeah. No more, 0 fiducial screws, 0 pre-op scans. And my segmentation, my registration is so much better. Yeah.
As far as like taking the scans from the patient's data.
Taking scans to patients sedated. So I tell them use like a pedo bite block or something because it doesn't matter where the scan is post-op. It doesn't matter, right? I need it to not have a double image is really the main focus. So if they scan it and it's like this, it doesn't matter, right? As long as it's not a double image. And I don't want the scan bodies touching each other because they're radio opaque. So you don't want that as well. Slightly open. I mean, it doesn't matter. They could be like this. It could be like this. It doesn't matter. I want a full head CT scan. I want cotton rolls, a pedo bite block in the posterior for the double arch case, and then that's all I need. I need a very clean. I mean, You know, like it doesn't matter where this is. Like I simply need this data and I need this data to kind of go onto here. That's all I need. Yeah. Co-diagnostics. So I do, I do all my CT scan cleanup and co-diagnostics, all of my registration and co-diagnostics. I don't know what it is, something about the algorithms. They just like, if you take larger data sets, I just feel like it does better. I don't know why. Anything else? Okay, no one left, just jokes. Here we go. Okay, the 4 agreements of ethical business. So this is by a guy, Chris Do. He's got a lot of cool stuff on YouTube. And I try to figure out like, how do I run my business in a way that is ethical and has integrity. And so here is the breakdown of what we try to do. And I will relate this to other stuff later. Number 1 is do good work. And you know that question I asked about how many arches does it take to master full arch, right? If you read other books, you hear the number 10,000 hours to master something, right? And so I only do full arch. So if I do 40 hours of full arch a week, that is 1,250 arches over 5 years, which is kind of about what we do, because we do about 20 arches a month, so we do about 250 per year. I've been doing it 5 years, so it's a little over 1,000 arches. I'm not saying it takes that many, but I will say that last year, I haven't been tracking it, but last year we were probably in like the 1,000-ish mark. And at that point, I felt like I had seen almost everything there was to see that could go wrong with the process. And so all of the stuff predicates that you actually do good work, okay? And I would say, so this came to me last week, and it was another lab, and they're part of my alliance training, and they're like, hey, we're trying to learn iBar through Blender. And they sent me this, but hey, like, can you split this and record yourself, and like I give that as a training tool. But I mean, look at this design here, right? And I show this to you because I'm trying to tell you that the bar for doing good work is actually not super high. Honestly, honest talk, like when you compare, right, if you have a technician that knows how to set teeth, that maybe has an experience in removable, like this stuff should be obvious, but this happens all the time. I see this stuff all the time. So the bar for doing good work is not super high, right? It's not unattainable to do. But the value has to be greater than your price. And I think that what we're not good at is that we focus so much on like, hey, what are the techniques? How do we be master craftsmen? We are not good at telling people how we provide value in what we do. And so that can use work, that's communication, that's organization, that's creating materials and protocols and having that stuff available, which I will show you. Number 3 is serving others. And for me, example would be, I only do full arch. I don't try to do anything else. So if someone says, hey, can you do this, I don't know, bar overdenture? Can you know, let's say it's an upper hybrid, it's a bar overdenture. Like, will you do that? And honestly, I'll say, hey, you know what? You're better served to use this lab because they do this all the time. They have all the denture teeth materials, whatever. If I do like a lower hybrid against like upper full arch reconstruction, right, or like upper veneers, I'll say, hey, you know what? I'll do the lower, but you're better served going to this person to do upper veneers. So putting the need of your client above your needs is serving others. And then lastly is acting with integrity, which is doing the hardest thing at the hardest moment possible when no one knows you're doing it. That's integrity, right? And so these are the things that we try to do in our lab. And I'll relate this later to some other stuff. But I'm super into business. I'm really into like the growth mindset, like how do we tweak things and how do we grow and how do we market. So this is guy, Alex Hormozy. Have you guys even seen this guy before? No. So he basically started these gyms and then started like a gym like consulting program and like sold like $100 million worth of like all the stuff. And he's like super like really, he has great material that's very concise and simple. And he's got these great videos where he takes other people's businesses, in this case it was a chiropractor, and then he goes through their business and he breaks it all down. And it's literally like if you can watch these, like this is an MBA in business for free on YouTube. And so they answer all these questions. Like these are the questions, I just took a screenshot from the video. Like these are business discovery questions that you should ask yourself. And if you can't answer, then you can't expect people to answer it for you. AKA, if you don't know your value, you can't communicate that value to others. So for me, right, who do I help? I help surgeons and prosthodontists. My main customer is not general dentists. Typically, although I do a lot of cases with general dentists. How do you help them? I am not the best technician in terms of like, you won't see my porcelain work on the cover of a magazine. Not to say it's bad, but that's not my forte. I feel like I can take someone from the very beginning to planning the surgery, to a surgical temp, to a final, and I can stack the case, and I can take you from beginning to end. So if you want someone where you want to have a partner to treat your patients with and have that partner take you from beginning to end, like that's me. That's how I help people. I make money primarily by two ways. Number one, surgical temporaries. We charge $17.50 for a mil temporaries, including the scan. And then I already told you our fees for our final restorations. How do we find them? I still believe in the referral model because I feel like my price point is potentially outside of dentists that recruit directly to the public, right? Those price points are typically lower. No judgment or right or wrong, but that's in my price bucket, I work better in a referral network. And so what happens is that I do the normal stuff. I go to study clubs, I work with surgeons, they typically refer me to their referrals, and that's how I grow my business. How many do we get a month? Typically, we invoice about 20 arches a month, and we have about 60 in the lab. So we finish about a third of what's in the lab, and that pipeline has to keep basically going. Our goal is basically to continue what we're doing, but at a slightly higher level and with better service. The problem is scalability of hiring and training. Right? So that is my business, and you should be able to do the same for you and yours. One thing that totally changed for me was that I was able to give the value of my time an actual dollar amount. So this is a free thing you can do. It's called the value of your time calculator. It's from clearthinking.org. And what you do is you go on there and it'll ask you how much money do you want to make. It'll ask you how many hours do you work. It'll ask you questions that make you question the value of your time. So for instance, if you were stuck at a train station and if a ticket, let's say you're taking a train from Portland to Seattle and it's 4 hours and it costs $100. How much more would you pay for a ticket to get you there 3 hours faster? Things like that, like trying to quantify the value of your time. And so for me, the value of my time is $380 per hour. That's the quantitative value of my time per hour. And then from there, I set my fees and prices based off my overhead and the profit margin I want to make on that product. And there's a model from 1990 who said this in Vogue: I won't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day. So you hear that saying, like, I don't roll out of bed for like $1 million, whatever it is. Like, I won't roll out of bed for something if I'm not making at least $380 per hour. That's my hard cutoff. So if someone calls me like, hey, Mrs. Jones, she broke her tooth and she's in Essex tomorrow, can you do it? Nope. Not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do it because I can't help everyone. My issue is that I am a pleaser, and so I needed to set a hard boundary, and that required me to put a monetary number on that boundary. So I'm not saying this is different because this is my own business. You have bigger labs, like you have to figure out how that works for you. But I think that number is really, really important. So this is an analogy for an analogy. My wife and I got married, and she's Korean. And when I flew up to Portland to meet her parents, which are Korean, we had dinner at her house. And Korean people like serve fruit in the meals. It's like an Asian, it's an Asian thing. And so my wife peeled my orange for me. And like for me, like my love language is acts of service. And like that was like awesome. Like I felt like at that moment, I felt really good. And yeah, that was for me, that worked great. And then what happened was we had kids. And then my oldest son is 6 now. His name is Connor. And when he started going to school, my wife would pack his lunches. And then one morning, I went and saw his lunchbox, which was open, and his oranges looked like this. And I'm like, where's all the white stuff? I'm talking like, hey, where's all the white stuff? She's like, oh, I took the lingerie off. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, oh, that white stuff's called lace, and I take them off because Connor doesn't like it because it's bitter. I'm like, okay, all right, that's a different level of service, right? That's another level. Here's my family. This is 2 weeks ago. So Connor, he's 6. My son Dean, he's turning 3 in March, and he's starting to go to preschool as well. And I can't make this up. 2 weeks ago, my wife's packing his lunch, and I look at the orange, and the orange looks like this. I'm like, what is this? She's like, this is called orange caviar. I'm like, so there's no membranes. It's just like the caviar of the orange, okay? And so the point of this is that these are all oranges, right? Like, what is your orange caviar, right? If you have all these people that have the same technology, that have the same skills, like, what is your orange caviar? Like, what is that? And the difference between, what was that? I mean, I agree, right? But the question is, like, the difference from this to this is not that big. But man, I stole one, and that orange caviar is good. Right? It's really, really good. And so, so my wife's Korean, and Korean people love to they're into perms, right? Like guys and girls, like they still do perms. And so I used to have like really long, nice hair. And what happened was my wife's like, she watches a lot of Korean dramas. I don't know if you guys watch Korean dramas like on Netflix. It's the thing, like Squid Games, whatever. And so she's like, hey, like maybe before you should maybe get a perm before you can't do it anymore, like just to see, right? I'm like, yeah, like this is one, yeah. I may not be able to do it again, right? I gotta do it. And so I went to say, so this is the picture. I sent this picture. I see there's one lady in Beaverton. Her name is Ginny, and she does all the perms for all the Korean people at our church. Okay, and she's the lady. And so I sent my wife this picture. She's like, oh my God, like, what did you tell her to do? I just said I wanted like a little bit of texture. She's like, no, no, no. She scrolls and she's like, that's too tight. Like, that's too tight. And so I'm like, it's too late now. Like, I'm already under the thing. So I come home, and then I've never seen my wife laugh harder in her life. Because what I was hoping for was like a nice like beach wave, right? Instead I ended up like this puby wiry mess. Okay. So here's the cycle of change for new perms, right? So I was here, which was like, this perm's gonna look dope, right? And then what happened was I actually got it, and I realized, hey, this doesn't look good. Informed pessimism. And within 2 hours, I went from here to valley of despair, right? So there was an option, there's choices. Number one, which is what I wanted to be like, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna go back and then shave my head. Let's start over. Or I could take the time and just like let things take its course. And so I let things take its course, and I stuck with it, and we got like product and stuff. And then I saw my mom in January, so I've had the perm for like 3 months at that point. And she was like, Charles, like, you look like Patrick Mahomes. And I was like, yeah, I kind of do, right? And so my whole thing is that my analogy is that when I tell people, they say, hey, like, how are you going to help me do this case? I say, okay, well, if you're at the 1 yard line, I will get you to the end zone in the least number of steps possible, right? I'm not going to run 16 running plays, and I'm also not going to do a Hail Mary, but I'll probably get this in like 2 to 3 plays, and I'll do it fairly predictably. And so that's my thing. And when I get a lot of these consulting clients from Alliance Training, the number one thing they always ask me is like, hey, can you send me your workflow? Because most labs don't have a written down workflow that they can send to their customers or their clients. So here's our hybrid workflow. And so this is what we send to, we put this on our website, we send this to our people. So pre-op records, okay? Surgeon takes a full head CT scan in MIP, closed by TMJ visible. I need an intraoral scan. If they have a denture, I need a 360 scan of the denture with beads, which is like a double scan protocol. Then I need a photo series, which I put into SmileCloud. For the restorative doctor, I need a shade, I need a wax rim. If they can't scan this in MIP, I need them to do a leaf gauge and CR bite to scan the CT scan in CR, and then I need a material choice, which for us is either going to be zirconia or a bar. If they do photogrammetry, it's really bar with titanium or titanium with zirconia. And then we see the patient at the lab. We have a Zircons on Face Hunter scan, and so we see the patient. I take photos, I do a smile design, and then we don't charge for that. That's kind of a value added to the process. So pre-op workup, we take about 5 days, and I will do a wax up and then do the implant design and co-diagnostics, and then we'll do a webinar, we'll review it, agree on the treatment plan, and then at that point, if they haven't presented the fees, they can present those fees to the dentist. Day of surgery, surgeon places the multi-units, places the implants. We have a consignment of Straumann multi-units, so if we need to, we can bring it. OptiSplint or photogrammetry, like this is basically the same. So scan OptiSplint, send the OptiSplint, take a post-op CT scan with cotton rolls, and separate healing caps from opposing dentition. So that's the post-op CT scan. We will provide the OptiSplint if it's grammetry. We fabricate temporary for the next day. Day after surgery, we bring the temporary. The doctor delivers temporary and checks occlusions. And we always tell them, schedule that patient after lunch. Just if something happens, we can always fix something in that morning. Restorative appointment number 1, which is after implant integration, torque the MUAs, check it with the OptiSplint or take a new iCam, scan the prosthesis, take a tissue scan. Usually at that point, if we have dialed in our pre-surgical workup, then usually we don't have to do a prototype, especially if it's a lower arch. I typically can go directly to final on those. If it's an upper arch case, then maybe they wanted like a size of length change or whatever, I might do a second prototype appointment, but that's basically a prototype try-in, occlusion, by reg, and a photo. So most of our 90% of our lower arch cases are done in one restorative appointment. The second appointment is delivery of the final prosthesis. And then again, it's optional number 3 if they want another prototype. So these are, I already told you our fees for that, but that's what we charge for this process. And the way I did this is, again, I figured out what was my fee, like what did I need to make per hour? I added my overhead, added my parts, I added my 60% profit margin, and that's how I got to this. And it just so happens, like not even comparing to other people, but in our community, that's about the median, and that's about the median as well. And for you, that's probably also, I bet, also probably pretty close, not that far off, maybe within one standard deviation, I bet. Any questions? No, okay. So we'll finish with this. Why do things break? And like I mentioned, like my porcelain work will never end up on a magazine. So what I do is I'll show you the stuff that breaks. So then you can't say, hey, like, why did it break? I already told you it sucked and it broke. Like, you can't get mad at me. It's because it's already broken. So this case came back, and what happened was the prosthodontist, so this fractured, and then the prosthodontist wanted us to make changes, so we actually adapted some of this so that we can scan it. And then this was on multi-units. It broke right at the tie base position. And so the question is, well, like, why do these cases break? And I will say in the last 3 years that I've tracked some of this, this was the only maxillary case that has broken. The rest of them have all been lower arches. And I will say that most of them fracture at the time of delivery or shortly thereafter. Like very rarely do you have a case go on in the mouth for like 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and then fracture. That's pretty rare for us. It usually happens right away or shortly thereafter, within a couple weeks. This is a desk tie base. This is the 8 millimeter tall tie base. So restorative space, you don't measure restorative space from the platform to the incisal edge. You measure from the restorative space to the screw access hole here. And so that is, in this case, that's, if that tie base is 8 millimeters, that's about 10 millimeters restorative space. The question is, okay, well, like, what do you need? Because if you do an FP1, 10 millimeters restorative space, right? You're not getting 15 millimeters restorative space on FP1. So if you look at the ITI, this is their consensus from 2023, and this is their prosthetic consensus. And if you look at the very bottom, monolithic zirconia hybrid prosthetics, 11 to 14 millimeters, 11 millimeters in the anterior from the platform of the implant to the screw access hole, not to the incisal edge. So this is the photo, right? That long axis, like that's your restorative space. You're not measuring to the incisal edge. That doesn't help you. You're measuring how much material do you have around that tie base. That's actually the measurement. And so the question is, well, like, okay, like did this break because of minimum restorative space, or was there something else going on? And I'll, spoiler, I did this case 3 times. And I'll show you the case. So I thought, so this prosthodontist, we did this case with OptiSplint. And so I figured, hey, like he knows what he's doing. We have a model. We cement the tie bases on the model as passive. And so I figured it was restorative space limitation. And so what we did was we redid this case. We split it in I-bar, and we did a bar with the substructure. And the problem was, I didn't show this, but the zirconia actually fractured on top of the bar. And so the takeaway is that, like, a lot of people call this like bulletproof. It's not bulletproof to impassivity, right? If you have impassivity, it will create tension on that cemented zirconia sleeve. And you may not get fracture of the bar, but you'll get fracture of the zirconia. So titanium structures don't mask massive issues with passivity. It just doesn't happen. And so he redid the OptiSplint, and then we compared it to the initial, and it actually was off. And so what we decided to do was like, okay, I'm gonna remake it. Like, did I need a bar? Well, okay, no, if the issue was passivity, then I didn't need a bar. I just needed to have a more accurate verified cast. And so we redid the case again in monolithic zirconia, and then that fractured as well. And so because this was passive, the issue actually was restorative space in this case. And so it's vertical. Yeah, it's a vertical. In this case, it was actually between the tie bases. And so, and if you did an FP1, I mean, you're gonna that's the amount of space you get, right? So that was part of my criteria. So this year I have 2 goals. One is to dress more Euro. So my wife got me these shoes, so I feel like this is like a more Euro, right? And then goal number 2 was to do more bars, because I just feel like it'll help with some of these challenges. And so when we get fractures on the lower arch, it's almost always around the tie base. So again, like except for that maxillary case, all of our fractures were on lower arch cases. And what I realized was that in this case did happen to be in the mouth for a long time. If you look in the lower anterior, you see that calculus, right? And occasionally we get cases that come back to lab. Most of them are tie-based debonding issues, which is not a big deal. But on almost every single one, I noticed that even though we polished to a high shine, right? Whether that's glaze or some porcelain, there's still like something for like biofilm to attach to. And then I did this case. Well, this case is still in flux. We're redoing her upper hybrid she had done in Mexico. And then I went to the case to help scan and everything. She was like, hey, can you look at my lower arch? It feels like it's sharp on the lingual. So I thought like it might be fractured. And so I get in there with my iPhone and a camera, and look at that. And this was in the mouth 2 years. And so at this point I had seen like probably 10 or 15 cases. And this was my impetus to stop stacking porcelain on the lingual, because I don't think anyone notices. And again, like if you tell people ahead of time, it's an explanation, versus if you just send it, it's like, dude, what is this? And it's an excuse. So I say, hey, you know what? Just FYI, you might have seen cases that have pink porcelain on lingual. We don't do that. Because if you look at the literature, everyone knows this, polished titanium, polished zirconia, that is the #1 biocompatible type of treatment for these materials. And so we no longer stack porcelain on the lingual. So this is kind of our workflow for these cases, is that when we mill them in-house, I spend about an hour with like a 11 blade in there, open up the embrasure space. We're kind of fine-tuning the contours. And for me, it's like the ASMR of like that blade against zirconia. It's like, I love that sound. And then like you play music like Enya or something, and I can be there for hours. You guys know if you do this, like it's awesome. It's like really soothing. So I spend about an hour doing this. So for me, that's $380 per hour. And then I still like to do pre-contour or pre-center infiltration. So my cases come out like this. And what I do is that I actually leave the stabilizer on because when I stack porcelain, because now I'm not stacking porcelain on the lingual anymore. So the cool thing is that now I've got a handle I can hold on to, and I just put that into the oven on the flat side, which is pretty cool. So I just hold on to it, and I use that as a way to do it. The challenge is that, again, I'm trying to balance like craftsmanship versus business, right? $380 per hour, does this time justify? Is the difference in aesthetics justify the time I spend doing this? I don't know. Yeah. Oh, yeah, go for it. And this is a nice, even though we don't stack porcelain on the intagli or the lingual, I still do pink infiltration on the lingual, just so it gives it kind of a pink hue. So on the lingual side, it's got some pink infiltration, so it's not completely white. It's got kind of a pink offset. So I'll show a case, and this is the case that, the demo case that I'll show you that we did for Argen, and we'll finish with this. So this is Sarah. And I'm a denturist in Oregon, so I can treat patients if they have a multi-unit abutment. I can restore those cases. And Sarah has, if you notice here, she's got these diastemas, right? Her teeth are all very mobile. And so she has a bone disease called florid osseous dysplasia with bone cysts. And this only typically affects African American women. And the way it presents is that you get these bubbles of like basically no bone density. And ortho is contraindicated. She didn't know this. She had ortho, the teeth moved, they never went back because the bone didn't rebound. And so what happens, they all flayed out like this, and their teeth are all super mobile. So as a result, we couldn't put implants, in the normal positions. So we planned something like this. We have normal BLX implants in like the lateral positions and these quad zygomas because we weren't going to get any primary stability in the posterior maxilla. And when I did this case 2 years ago, so spoiler, this is a redo. So our lab is up there, Ceramic Dental Lab. 4 or 5 blocks away is a clear choice. And then literally, 3 miles away down here is a Nuvia. So if you don't know Nuvia, anyone heard of Nuvia before, right? There's a full arch center that deliver a final within like 24 to 48 hours. And so we have all of this like marketing of like full arch stuff by us. And we decided like, hey, like I wanted to at least, even if I didn't believe in it, I wanted to at least know that what was the protocol for us to do it if we had to do it, right? And so for Sarah, she was very, very anxious. And so we went to surgery, we did OptiSplint, we scanned the case, and then I saw her that afternoon. This is the day of surgery, and I put this in, and it's a printed temp prototype, and literally I'm just looking at aesthetics of 6 to 11. I'm looking at size edge position and midline, and then make sure the bite's pretty good. So then we take that back to the lab, we mill it, we sinter it overnight, and then the plan was to stack the case the next day. She was going to come back at 5 p.m. I was going to deliver it the next day, right? So here's my OptiSplint. And then this was in April, we had a pretty big ice storm. And so I ended up seeing her 72 hours later. So this is her 72 hours later with her zirconia. So this is her pre-op and then her post-op basis 72 hours later. And then what happened was that she called me later that week. She was like, hey, you got to take this out. I'm like, what's going on? She's like, I can't breathe. I feel like I can't swallow, I can't talk, I can't eat. Like I'm really having a hard time here. And so we talked through it, and she ended up getting some medication kind of help. But I think this triggered some condition that was pre-existing. And one of the pre-existing conditions that she had was that she's a very narrow, very high vault. Okay, so if you look at this here, like very narrow and high. So even with her normal teeth, her tongue has a hard time getting in there. And so you put something on top, and even if you close that space by like 2 millimeters, like sensitive patients will feel like that claustrophobia, right? And so this is well documented in the literature, is that the effects of palatal morphology on articulation, and people with like very high vaulted palates have difficulty with S and Z's if their medial groove is very high and it's a very narrow anatomy. And the result of that is what can happen is called oral synestopathy. which is basically a psychotic or a psychosis that's a result of this feeling of like that the tongue not being able to touch the roof of their mouth. And so what happens with these patients is they don't realize it's a psychosis event, and so they visit multiple dentists versus seeing a psychiatrist, and then they feel like they have this foreign body, but it's not a dental problem. It's a mental problem. On top of that, we know that zygomatic implants in general have some indications that make them challenging. The main thing is that zygomatic implants typically end up coming very palatal. So if those of you that have restored these implants have noticed they end up always being very palatal, and that bulky bridge can lead to discomfort in speech. So you've that on top of someone with anatomy that's already kind of very sensitive, and that's it's a recipe for disaster. And so this was her with her previous prosthesis, and these are all tie bases, and the palate is open, right? But just that amount of closing that space really affected her. And then you look at her vault, like how high and narrow that is. And so now I'm adding this to my checklist. So on top of like the basic things like, hey, prosthetic line's got to be above smile, like this, the basic stuff. Like, I also look at the vault to be like, hey, like, is this going to be a challenging case? Like, is this something we need to address? And then when I designed this prosthesis, I added 4 millimeters to accommodate for where I thought the soft tissue was going to land, and I missed it because she actually receded more than 4 millimeters. She actually receded about 8 millimeters. So I don't know how these centers predictably do a 24-hour, 48-hour prosthesis and not have soft tissue, because I bulked up that thing quite a bit. Anyway, so what I did was we designed it, and then this is my new design. You compare it to the previous, you can see we debulked this a lot. And on the upper left side, the screw axles are probably going to be exposed because I want to just close that profile. So I took this to Blender and I split it. And then I milled one. So this is the one that I milled and then pre-contoured finished. And then finished. And again, I kept this on the whole time. But that stabilizer stayed on because at the very end, I just cut it off and then high shine the zirconia. Super easy to do. And so what I did was I thought, okay, is all this work necessary, right? Is the pre-contour or the contour pre-centering, is the infiltration necessary? Are all these things necessary? So what I did was I did this and I sent the same files to Argen, okay? And I'm gonna pass this around because I want you to see it. You wanna grab this, Stephanie, and pass this around? Okay, so what I did was I sent it, and then this is me unboxing the case, okay? So there's like unboxing videos on YouTube. Yeah, I like those too. And I thought this was funny because Paul is my wife's dad, and he's been gone for like 10 years. Okay, he's been dead for 10 years. But that's how long we've been working, because that was before I even took over the lab. And I thought, like, I looked at it, I was like, dude, like, should we change that? But then I noticed, like, up there, it says that Anton sent this case. So that's a lie. So this is all just lies, right? So they cancel out, it's fine. Anyway, so then I'm unboxing the case, and I did this way because I didn't know how this was gonna fit. And you probably didn't know either. So, and this could have been, I mean, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but if you felt it, you can see. So the zirconia, you milled and sintered. I did not touch it in the pre-sinter state. I did not infiltrate it. The tie bar was milled split file, and you polished it, pre-polished it. So I didn't even touch it. So here's the bar in here, and then the zirconia sleeves in here. And then I think at some point, I almost cut myself trying to open up these stickers on this freaking package. But yeah, it's lots of documentation. So the bar, even just the bar. I mean, again, if I mill a bar and my zircon's on, it takes me probably a good hour to metal finish that. That's $380 of my time to metal finish this case, to get it to look like that. So already I'm like that's a win for me, right? So there's like some scalability in there. And then, so this is why I feel like I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna cut myself doing this thing. I'm trying to find the groove, but I eventually get it. And then I'm thinking like, hey, how is this gonna fit? Because everyone's got different parameters. If you go on Facebook, everyone's like, oh, what's your cement gap? Do you scan the bar? Like, what do you do? And so I wanted to see, like, if I outsource this, like, how predictable is the finish line transition going to be? Because ultimately, that's what you're looking at. So this is the case, right? Again, haven't touched it. And the 90-degree milling, pretty darn good. Honestly, I did not think it was going to be that good. I thought that me spending an hour with an 11 blade would be significantly better, but it wasn't. And that thing dropped in. So I used the blender default, which is 140 microns. And so when I do this on my zircons on, I drop it down to 100 microns. And this one I kept it at 140, and it was perfect. And here's again a quick video of that. Yeah, I mean, the polish was nice. I mean, this case, so I saved an hour of pre-sinter contouring. I saved an hour of metal finishing, not to mention the time it takes me to cam the case, to clean the mill between the metal and dry, or the wet and dry milling. There's several hours of work in there, and I feel like I got like a pretty good result. I mean, those of you that felt like that's pretty good, would you be happy with that? Yeah, I mean, I'd be pretty happy with that. And so, so this is the case, and so this is the side by side, and the one that you have going around, I only stacked 6 through 11, and the reason why I could have delivered any of this one or that one, it wouldn't have mattered, but I wanted you to feel that, so I brought it back. But I could have delivered either one. But man, that finish line was amazing. And I didn't, when I stacked the 7 through 10, I didn't feel like I lost anything in not infiltrating and not doing that work with the 11 blade. And then we deliver the case. So that's a big difference, right? I mean, the zirconia to that. And for me, like every single Zygomatic case, every pterygoid case, every case with a remote anchorage, I'm going to do with the bar. It's going to have a metal lingual, and I might have screw access holes exposed, and that's fine, right? She was really happy with the shade. She wanted to go lighter, and she needs the same thing on the bottom. She'd been putting off the lower, but she was dealing with the psychosis on the top, and I think we finally got it. And so I did this case literally on Monday, because it arrived on Saturday or on Friday. I did this case 4 p.m. on Monday, this past Monday, and she texted me at 5:25. I'm driving home. I didn't realize the effect of having the roof of my mouth open again. I can't explain to you the difference. It's made me feel I didn't know it was possible. I feel like once we do the lower final, it'll be even better. I can't tell you how dark it's been for me this year. Thank you for sticking with me and doing it. For me, like, again, going back to like the 4 agreements of running an ethical business, like that for me is like, that's worth more than anything, right? And if I could give you some closing advice here, I would say that when you get to the valley of despair, know when it's time to quit and know when it's time to push through. And that's not always clear, but when you get there, just know that you're there and know that you could push through and be successful. And if you choose to repeat, that's okay, but you may not find something that will take you through there without putting the effort. Because the effort to go from 3 to 4 to 5 is your sweat equity. And that you cannot get around from doing that. And if you get to the valley of despair, be patient, take time, let nature take its course. Because sometimes you get lucky and then your mom will think you look like Patrick Mahomes. So thank you, that's my time.